Hello and welcome back to this tutorial on creating a simple PHP strategy game. Now, in the last few parts of the tutorial, we were dealing with training and untraining units as well as buying and selling weapons. So now what we're going to do is figure out how we're going to calculate how much gold the user gets each turn, as well as how much food they get each turn, and attack and defense stats. So what we have here is our database, and this is currently the stats table. And what we're going to do is we're going to add two fields we'll do it at the end of the table. So when we hit go, and these two fields are going to be the income and the farming. Now, the income is how much gold each user will get per turn, and the farming is going to be how much food they get per turn. So we save that, fairly simple, and as we can see here, the default is 0 and 0. Because we changed this, we are going to have to also change the registration page, so that when the user registers, and if they don't log in after they register, then they will still get gold and food until they log in and can actually use that. So what we're going to do now is create a page, and let's see, we'll create a new page, and this will be called update stats.php. And in this page we're going to be updating each of the stat based on other various things. We're going to include this page when the user trains or untrained units, as well as buys and sells weapons. So because we're including the page, we don't have to worry about including any headers or the safe, since that will already be included in the page. So first things first, we're going to work with income. How much income we want per worker. Now, it can vary. Again, it doesn't really matter. We can always do 10 per worker, 5 per worker, something along those lines. What I'm going to do is, let's see, how about we do this? We'll say income will be equal to, how do we want it? Let's just say 5 times power unit workers, 1s, to 0.5. Now what this is 5 times the number of workers raised to the 1/2 power, which, if you're any good at math, you'll know that something raised to the 1/2 power is equal to the square root of that number. So now, just to see if this will be any use to us, we'll say, let's say we started off with 5 workers. 5, and we take the square root of that, and we have 2.236 whatever. Now we multiply that by 5, and our income is going to be 11, because integers, they do that whole rounding thing, round down, round up. So our income is going to be 11. So I think that's fairly decent. That means for basically, if you just have one worker, then each turn you'll be able to buy a weapon. Now let's say, that the game goes on and we have 1,000 workers. Now if we take the square root of that and multiply it by 5, now you'll see that there's 158 per turn, which is slightly good, but not very good. So what we're just going to do is we'll have a plain and simple, how much do we want? We don't want it to be too much, whereas things will get crazy and out of control, but at the same time, we want it to be reasonable. So if we do, I don't know, let's just say we do, if we did 4, then currently you would start off with an income of 20. You could buy 2 weapons per turn. Now, if the user gets up to 1,000 workers times 4, that's 4,000 gold per turn, which means they could buy 400 weapons per turn. Let me just go back to the database, and if they can buy 400 weapons per turn, once we calculate attack, you'll see that attack will get pretty big. So what we're going to do is, if we look at the structure, we're going to change sword and shield. Because currently, the highest they can go with this is roughly 2 billion. It's like, wait, 429. It's basically this number. Now, if we multiply that by 10, that's that much gold to max out the number of weapons you have. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to allow us to double that number. So by changing the attributes to unsigned, that 2.1 billion automatically becomes that 4.3 billion-ish. So if we're changing that, what we're going to do here is basically change all the stats except ID. So gold, we're going to want to have, actually, they're all going to be unsigned. Now, for this video, oopsie. Sorry. Just messing around with the thing. Okay. For this video, actually for this game I should say, we're going to make the gold attack and defense and food I should say, big integers. And the big integer allows us to go to large numbers, which is like 18 quintillion, which is basically 20 digits long. So if we save this, now they can do that. And if you go back here, you'll see that nothing has changed. So what we're going to do is we'll just leave it at 4 times the unit of workers. For the farming, we don't want to have too much of an advantage. So what we're going to do is we'll go back to that 5 times the square root of the number of farmers, comma 0.5. This will allow us to gain food rather quickly, but it will also start to level off at an even rate. Now for attack, what do we want for attack? Let's just do a simple, I don't know, 10 times the number of warriors. But it would be nice if we could do that, but since we have weapons, it's going to be a bit more complicated. I'm going to pause the video and I will quickly make a formula that you can copy down, since we kind of want to keep this somewhat short. So I'm going to pause the video right now. Okay, so what I've done is I basically calculated the attack, and it's going to be very simple. You can see this num1 variable is equal to the minimum between the amount of swords the user has and the amount of warriors the user has. So basically, whichever one is smaller. So then for this if statement right here, if the smaller of the two was the swords, that means we have a certain number of swords and warriors, and then we may have warriors left over. So now, attack is going to be equal to 10 times the sword, meaning all the warriors that have swords, plus any leftover warriors. Meaning, if warrior was like 50 and sword was like 40, you would have 10 times 40 plus 50 minus 40, which is 10, for those 10 leftover warriors. Because if a warrior doesn't have a sword, they're not as powerful, but they can still do some damage. Now, if the minimum number is warriors, that means we have more swords than warriors. So we might have like 50 swords and 40 warriors. Now, unless like some warriors could, dual wield swords, which would be pretty freaking cool, I'm not even gonna lie. But unfortunately, we're not going to do that in this game. So, since we have less warriors, it's just 10 times warriors. The extra swords are just kind of left there. The exact same thing goes for defense. We pick the minimum between shields and defenders. If there's a lower number of shields, calculate the defenders with shields and add in the extras. Then, if there's a lower number of defenders than shields, we just count for the defenders with shields. I'll pause the video now so you can copy all this down. Now that you've done that, we are going to do an update stats, and this will be a MySQL query. We update stats, we set income equal to the income that we had. Actually, I'm just going to pause this just to save time, and I will resume it once this query is finished. Okay, so I finished the query, and as you can see here, I made a mistake. I forgot to rename the variables. That's something that happens with every great programmer. So here's our query. We update the income, the farming, the attack, and the defense. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our weapons.php, and we're going to say, include update stats.php. So this is for when the user buys weapons, and also for when the user sells weapons. And the same thing for training and untraining units. We want to calculate the stats. I'm just going to show you that, as you can see, we have something here and here. If we train units, there we can see that we have an issue. And I actually made plural versions. We fixed that. So if we go back to your weapons or something, that undefined index ID is nothing to worry about. It's just, oh no, it is something to worry about, sorry. UID. There, I think I'm done with my mistakes now. So we go here, we train, you have trained your units, we go back, and as you can see, these are different now. So now if we go back to weapons, we can buy one of each. Actually, let's just buy two of each. That way you'll see that only the users with weapons are accounted for. So we have 10 and 10 there. And now if we go back here, you will see that we now have a farming and an income. So this will be when the turn takes place that they will increase your gold and food by this much. That's it for this part of the tutorial, so I will see you in the next video.